What's the best class in Baldur's Gate 3, and why is it the Circle of Moon Druid? Well, even if it's not the best, it's definitely the coolest. This class has amazing utility, massive AoE spells that also feature crowd control. Most of these spells require concentration, which we can avoid having interrupted by shifting into one of the many powerful wild shape forms as well. In addition to all this, we deal solid damage and have incredible utility outside of combat from the wild shape forms as well. Alright, at level 1, we're going to select Druid. On top of this, we're going to get a pair of cantrips and some spells. For the cantrips, I would recommend taking Shillelagh as well as Thornwhip. Now, if you're playing as Jahara, you'll have a scimitar that has the same effects as Shillelagh. However, this guide, I want it to have the ability to work for everybody, whether you're making this character from level 1 as your main character, respecking one of your other companions into a Druid, or using it for Jahara. So this is just useful, and this gives you the option of changing off that scimitar. For Thornwhip, this ability is really nice. Now, it's really situational, and you won't get that much use out of it, but when you are able to pull something off, it just feels absolutely fantastic with this. You're actually going to pull a creature closer to you, as opposed to a lot of other spells that might knock creatures back, but you could do the same things with this. You can pull them towards you and pull them off of cliffs, make them suffer fall damage, reposition them into AoEs, and other things of that nature. For ability scores, we're going to put 14 into dexterity. You have the ability to wear medium armor, and this will give you an extra 2 armor class from that. Now, if you're playing this as an end game or late game build, you may want to fine tune these points even more depending on the exact specific piece of armor that you're using. However, for the majority of people, this stat distribution is going to work. We're going to push our constitution up to 16 as well as our wisdom, and these are essentially our main stats here. And our intellect will be 10 as well as the strength, and charisma down to 8. Now keep in mind that when you use wild shape, you're going to take on the stats of the creature that you have shifted into. However, it's important to note that casting spells is still something we're often going to do. Our spell casting is going to be used as an action, and wild shape is going to be used as a bonus action. So a lot of times we're going to be able to cast a spell and then shift, so we still want to make sure that our spells are landing and getting modifiers from our wisdom score. For proficiencies, these are usually subjective to what you have in your party composition and what you're using as a background and so forth. In the case of Jahira, I think that animal handling and perception are really 2 nice ones to have. Perception is just nice in general, even if you buff this on multiple characters. And animal handling, at least for me in my playthrough, is something that I have kind of neglected across the board. So it's nice to have somebody with a decent score in that regard. For level 2, we'll get to select our subclass, and this is going to be Circle of the Moon. And the subclass feature of this is, as a bonus action, we can now assume the form of the beast or use this wild shape. We can also do this twice per short rest, meaning that we're going to be able to do this many times before we actually use a long rest. It makes this class really versatile. On top of this, we're going to get Lunar Mend, and we can expend spell slots to regain hit points, just improving how tanky, and our overall survivability in this build is extremely high. We're able to start and cast a form, shift into another shape, deplete that health pool, and actually get reverted back into the caster form. Just essentially gives us 2 life pools to work with. We're going to start off with a number of wild shape forms here, and they all have their own use here. So you can shift into things that can climb walls, you can shift into things that can go through holes, you can shift into damage dealers. A whole bunch of options here. Druid has an enormous array of things that it can do outside of combat as well as inside combat. And we also, at level 2, as the Circle of the Moon, are also going to get the wild shape bear. For prepared spells at this point, I like to go with Healing Ward, Fairy Fire, Thunder Wave, Ice Knife, and Entangle. And there's something we should mention about concentration spells. When you shift into a wild shape form, your concentration is not broken. This is extremely powerful, meaning we can cast a spell that has concentration and then shift to prevent it from being interrupted. So in the case of something like Entangle, we can slow down an area, possibly entangle them, and basically keep these enemies crowd controlled, shift into a form, and not have to worry about that breaking. At level 3, we'll just get some additional spells in the form of level 2 spells. At this point, what I like to take is Healing Ward, just for some outside of combat healing. You do have the ability to use this in combat as well, but primarily I will reserve my healing spells for outside of combat, and the Druid class just has so much utility inside of combat. Usually you can get away with that. So Fairy Fire as well. Flaming Spear. Now, Flaming Spear is very nice. You can actually use this, cast it, concentration spell. So again, then you can shift, and the Flaming Spear is often just utilized as a decoy, taking hits and distracting mobs that go to target it and so forth. I still like Ice Knife at this point. Eventually, I will replace this. Entangle, again, just another concentration spell, and Moonbeam, a level 2 concentration spell. Great for all the same reasons. This can be recasted to reposition the Moonbeam allowing you to just really take advantage of this to deal damage multiple times. And whenever you're looking for something to do, you can always kind of get out of the way, shift out of your form, reposition the Moonbeam, and keep that AoE damage going. At level 4, we'll be able to select another cantrip, prepare some additional spells, as well as select our feat. For a cantrip at this point, I like to take Guidance, additional ability check bonus. Now, nice to just have, so at this point I like to pick this up, especially as the checks start to get harder and harder. For preparing spells at this point, I like to also pick up Spike Growth, as well as Heat Metal. Now, what you'll notice here when we look at the selected spells, is aside from Healing Word, everything is a concentration spell, and this is just really playing off of that ability that Circle of the Moon Druids have, or Druids in general have, that you can cast a concentration spell, shift into a form, and not have to worry about it being broken. That's what makes these spells, in my opinion, the best choices for Druids to take. And the healing spell is really just for emergency use only, in case you need to heal somebody before they get knocked unconscious. Now, what we get from Spike Growth, just movement is going to be reduced, and again, you can cast this on choke points, slow down the enemy, shift into a form. And the other one, Heat Metal, is actually really nice. A lot of people don't take advantage of this. You can actually get hard-hitting enemies to drop their weapon, dramatically reducing the amount of damage that you take. And I don't take this on anybody else, so it's nice to fill that role in that regard. For feat ability improvement, I would recommend taking 2 points in ability improvement and slapping those into wisdom at this point as well. At level 5, we'll unlock level 3 spells, and what we're going to take here is Call Lightning, again another concentration spell. So you can see how this is just going to be a continued theme throughout the level process. At level 5, we also get an additional attack per turn in our wild shape form, doubling our damage output. Level 6, we'll get a couple more wild shapes that we can play around with, and as mentioned before, just the ability and utility that you have, whether it be inside of combat or outside of combat as a druid, is just incredibly high. Druid are one of the most interesting classes, I think, to play for your main playthrough, just because of your ability to interact with the world around you. Now, for prepared spells at this point, you could honestly take Sleet Storm or Daylight. You could certainly take anything you like, but I think that the choice is ultimately between these, and you can get some really good situational use from this. Again, a spell that you probably won't have this niche covered by anything else, so it's nice to pick it up somewhere. Sleet Storm, I feel like this gets a little redundant. However, there is a lot of encounters in which there will be fire all over the ground, so this is why I do consider this a strong candidate as well, because you'll often be looking to put those fires out and just douse them essentially. So you could go with either of these, whichever one you find more useful. At level 7, we'll get access to level 4 spells, and there's a lot of powerful options at this point. Now, regardless of how many we prepare, keep in mind that we're going to have a limited number of spell slots, so you don't necessarily need to overload yourself. You can swap these out depending on the situation and so forth. At this point, you could take Call Lightning, Ice Storm, Conjure Woodland Being. Blight is also a decent option, as well as Conjure Minor Elemental, and I would say that having 4 level 4 spells is too much, because you're just not going to have enough spell slots or charges to actually take advantage of this. So in this case, I'm actually going to take off Ice Storm. The reason for this is because Call Lightning, if I'm in caster form, I can just continually activate this after each additional turn and do more damage without using a second spell slot. So that's going to be nice. I'll have Blight for some guaranteed damage, even if they successfully pass the saving throw, as well as the Woodland Being, which lasts until long rest, just giving me more of a permanent summon to aid my party. And in this case, I'll go ahead and take Sleet Storm just for some added crowd control as well. Level 8, we'll get another wild shape in the form of Sabre-Toothed Tiger, which is a damage form. Again, we get the ability to prepare some more spells. At this point, I'm going to pick up Ice Storm as well. And for feats, we're going to go ahead and take another ability improvement. Now, you could alter this as well, and like I said, you might be at a point here where you're specializing your stats for your specific character and what you have access to in terms of equipment. In my playthrough, I'm going to continue to buff Wisdom, and this is just going to improve that spell casting ability I have when I'm not in a shifted form. At level 9, we'll get access to level 5 spells, and similar to when we got access to level 4, don't overload yourself at this period. What I'm going to take here is going to be Insect Plague. It's guaranteed damage, even on save, targets take half damage, and it's also a concentration spell. So again, I can cast this, shift into a form, and not have to worry about this. And this will allow me to use this as crowd control, as well as the damage that it deals, making this area difficult terrain, imposing disadvantage on perception checks, and so forth. So overall, just get some use out of this. And there's a lot of good options here, as the majority of casters have with higher level spells. At level 10, we're going to get a large power spike again, And this is largely in fact due to improved Wild Strike. We can now make 2 additional attacks after making an unarmed strike while in wild shape, just improving the overall damage output as well as consistency of being in one of those forms. We gain an additional cantrip. At this point I like to pick up resistance. And for actions, we're going to get 5 new forms. So we get the Dilophosaurus, as well as Air Myrmidon, Earth Myrmidon, Fire Myrmidon, and Water Myrmidon. And again, just the increased utility and versatility of this only goes on to improve. For prepared spells, I like to pick up some of the summons at this point, so we'll also pick up access to Conjure Elemental, as well as Conjure Minor Elemental, which is actually a level 4 spell. And this will kind of round out what we have for prepared spells. An enormous amount of concentration spells, CCs in there, and we also have summon spells, so just increasing a lot of utility and a lot of roles that may not be covered by other members of your party. We're just going to go Druid for all 12 levels, and I think that this is the best way to maximize what you're doing, in my opinion. Your stat distribution isn't that great for really multi-classing into anything else, so it's nice to be able to just pick up and continue to push these shape forms as well as pick up more spells for your disposal while you're in the caster form. For our equipment, we want to prioritize things that will affect us and benefit us in the caster or human form. The reason for this is because your passive traits aren't going to carry over in the wild shape form unless the equipment specifically says so, like the piece I'm showing you here. Definitely recommend giving Druid, and more specifically the Circle of the Moon subclass, a try. It's a tremendous amount of fun. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and have a great day.